Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
He's the independent running against a Democrat and Republican for Palm Beach County State Attorney. What does a candidate without a party have to do to win a race? Good morning and welcome. It's still 6 months before the election, but already there is a lot of talk about the race.
There's the Democrat, Dave Ehrenberg, the former state senator and pill mill czar, the Republican, Dina Kiever, and one running with no party affiliation, Robert Gershman. And Mr. Gershman is our guest today. We thank you for taking time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Briefly introduce yourself to our viewers. Tell us a little bit about your professional background, and then I want to jump into why you're not running as a Democrat. But first, your background.
Thanks. My background has always been criminal justice. After law school, I was a prosecutor in the Palm Beach County State Attorney's office back in 1991. Worked as a prosecutor until 96. My second child was born and felt it best to provide for the family and went into private practice and have done since 96 criminal defense work, mostly in Palm Beach County, but in other counties as well.
Democrat, but decided to run no party affiliation. Why did you make the decision?
I made the decision because I did not see the Democratic Party giving me any opportunity to be heard for the voters in August in a primary.
And why specifically do you say that?
They told me so.
Who they?
They being the head of the Democratic Party, Mr. Siegel.
And what did he say to you?
He said over a 2-hour period that, number one, we have our person. The Democrats want Mr. Ehrenberg to be their party representative. And although you are qualified, why don't you do something else? As in, why don't you maybe go for a different type of political office, not state attorney's office?
It's been reported that you said that they offered you a state Senate seat.
They offered me various things. That was the last offer I got. And
Mr. Siegel says that's not the case, that he did not offer. There was no specific seat mentioned, like, don't do this instead, you'll be able to do this.
I think Mr. Siegel, Mr. Siegel for sure confirmed that that conversation occurred. There were many of us there, myself and a very good friend of mine. Mr. Siegel was there with one of his Democratic committee people. And he went through the reasons why I should be maybe a commissioner or maybe why I should be a senator.
Let me ask, in politics, this happens. We also want to emphasize to our viewers at home, we'll be talking to all the candidates in the weeks to come. You'll be hearing from all the candidates for this post. But while we have you here, Mr. Siegel's also been quoted saying, listen, I think Dave Ehrenberg is better for the job. Let's rally around him. Why is that not legitimate in your mind?
Because Mr. Ehrenberg is not qualified to be the Palm Beach County State Attorney.
Why?
He has no experience in the criminal justice system. In state court, he doesn't appear, doesn't have the knowledge or experience in everyday cases or the issues that affect the voters, the communities, and those that crime impacts in Palm Beach County.
That's a pretty tough criticism. Here's a man who's a former state senator. Being a Palm Beach County State Attorney involves being politically aware. He's been a pill mill czar and in many quarters has been lauded for helping organize that work. That's pretty tough criticism.
I think it's accurate. I think he is no longer employed with the Attorney General's office. And those issues, while they are great for Tallahassee, do not directly make anyone qualified for the job of top prosecutor in the county dealing with hands-on everyday crime affecting the voters in the community.
Has the job of state attorney turned too political in this county, in your mind?
For me specifically, I think it has. And I view the job as one of being nonpartisan. In my non-party affiliation capacity, I view myself as independent. I don't need to answer to a party, Democrat, Republican, or any special interest.
Well, for his part, I just want to bring up a statement real quickly. When we asked Dave Ehrenberg about comments that he is part of a political machine, a spokesman told us this. Unfortunately, like most campaigns these days, Dave's opponents have turned to negative attacks and misinformation to prop up their campaigns. That from Christian Ulvert, a spokesman for Mr. Ehrenberg.
That's not an accurate statement. Number one, if he was not associated with the things that the investigative reporting has come up with, why not denounce? Why not separate? Why not at least take a position on the issue and say, I'm not part of it?
Let's touch on the fact you worked under prosecutors David Bloodworth and Barry Krischer, but Krischer's endorsed Ehrenberg. What do you say to that?
Well, Krischer endorsed Ehrenberg before the deadline, before Ms. Kiever and I were in the race. And Mr. Krischer, after I left the state attorney's office, turned to me when he had cases that needed a special prosecutor. I was a special prosecutor in a number of cases after I left the office, hired by Mr. Krischer on significant death penalty work and other crimes that affected the community. So people that get endorsements before knowing who the prospective candidates are, I think, are not fully knowledgeable for that purpose.
Let's not forget, and you mentioned her name, Dina Kiever. Why is she not more qualified than you? Former federal prosecutor. Some would argue she has a 50,000-foot view at the federal prosecutorial level, working in one of the toughest, most dynamic districts in the nation. She spent time in the Southern District of Florida out of Miami, running as a Republican. Are you two going to split the vote, you and Mr. Ehrenberg, and hand a victory to her? And why are you better qualified than she is?
I'm not sure how the vote will end up, of course. I hope we don't split it, and I hope I get it, of course. She appears to be very competent. Her resume, like you say, is Philadelphia and Florida and federal court. She works for one of the premier criminal defense federal practices in Miami. But her ties are federal court. Her ties are Miami. These issues are local. These issues are important to Palm Beach, and I've been doing that. I got married in Boca to my wife 24 years ago. My life is here. My work is here, and I feel better tuned to the issues.
Keeping it local, talk about the major problems you see within the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office right now. What do you identify as a problem, and what can you do to solve it?
Overall, I think my knowledge and experience in any of those areas will help try and resolve it. I'm not sure I could just go in there and sprinkle something magic and it just happens, but from the everyday trial attorney dealing with cases in court, first-time offenders, gun cases, cases that have significant effects on victims and society. I'm able to give the guidance, give the knowledge, give the experience as to how to resolve those on a everyday level, on a policy level, and on a really a solid interchange between the victims, not to be re-victimized, the offenders not to re-offend or recidivate, and do the best that we can to effectuate that.
You have a chance with law enforcement officials in this community to set and sculpt the agenda on the issues you deem important. Would that include fighting against gangs, the drug problem? As you would shape the fight against crime, sitting in the top prosecutorial job in this county, how would you shape it? What are the major areas of concern for you?
I think there are a few. I think that women need to be protected. I think juvenile justice and restorative justice for juveniles are important. Corruption is important. Gang violence and drugs, because drugs permeates into all different aspects of things. So there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and the difficult part is, as everyone knows, the decreased resources make it difficult to really get to the root of each and every problem. But I think those are the highlights of what's necessary to protect the citizens, protect the elderly, and hopefully have a safer community.
You have two teenagers and a wife, as you said, of 24 years, a busy law practice. Why did you want to do all this, especially this kind of a contentious campaign? What was the driving force for you?
I loved it when I was younger without the kids to be a prosecutor. I thought it was great. At that point, though, my and my wife's priorities changed to rear the family, so they're about to go to college. And I want to give back. I want to go into public service. It is, as you say, my practice is great. The pay would be far less than I'm making now, but from a societal point of view, I feel I could help more people by being a state attorney versus a criminal defense attorney defending my clients on an individual basis. I make a change in their lives. I help them. But the state attorney has just a power to help so many more.
Running with no party affiliation, I believe you've acknowledged you have some hills to climb. You are, as you said, you're going to run against two people, Republican and Democrat, who ostensibly will have more in the way of resources, money, manpower, the ability to get their message out. How do you compete against that? How are you building your campaign organization, if you are?
I do have a good campaign organization. There are people that actually care about the issues that are not party-based. They are people that deal with these issues every day. They're behind me. I don't know what those other parties will do in order to get the money to make the TV commercials, but my role, my job is to voice my opinions, have the voters, give the voters a choice, and let them decide. And if they accept me, that'd be great. If they reject me, I'm fine with that also. But the opportunity to give the voters that NPA, that independent choice where I'm not beholden to anyone, is so important that in my heart it is paramount to anything. My great law practice, a decreased salary that I would make if I got the job, it is the right thing to do for the community.
When you're out there campaigning, talking to people, talking about your experience and why you're right for the job, what are you hearing back from people? Are they giving you suggestions on what they think might be wrong with the office, what they'd like to see improved, changed? Are they giving you feedback?
Sure. A lot of feedback, and a lot of the prosecutors that are there, I either was there with in the early 90s or I deal with every day in court. So they're more than happy to come up to me and say, Robert, you know, please look at this, or please address this and see how you can do it or make it better, and those type of issues. So I'm fortunate because I have a great working relationship with everyone in the Office of the Public Defender, the Office of Regional Counsel, that those issues are my strength because I'm there every day and I could realize and implement what I think are hopefully effective policy changes.
Mr. Gershman, we thank you for being in here. We know we want to make a date with you as the campaign draws near, as again we'll be doing with your opponents. Thanks for coming in.
All right, thanks again, guys. Very much.
And still to come, it looks to be an interesting race, and we're planning to have the other candidates on the show, as Michael mentioned, as we continue to cover this contest. But still ahead, our roundtable up next.
Now for our roundtable with News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Robert Watson, and Brian Crowley, author of the CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Gentlemen, let's begin with you, Brian. Talk about the state of the state attorney's race and how you see this playing out.
You know, if there's any race that you would like to think is a race that's just straightforward and above board, it would be your state attorney's race. One would like to think. Unfortunately, this race has become surrounded by controversy, calls for investigations, and it's really sort of a shame because, as I said, I mean, the voters ought to be able to look to this state attorney's office and your public defender's offices as two places where you don't have those kinds of shenanigans going on.
Yeah, these are races that usually don't draw media attention, especially when you have someone like former State Senator Dave Ehrenberg, who's, you know, such a front runner. However, there's been so much drama with the allegations, as Brian said, of heavy-handedness from Democratic leaders leaning on prospective candidates like Judge Kirsta Marks and others to not run, trying to get out of the way. Whether they did or they didn't, perception is reality, and this is the conversation we're having. And then Robert Gershman jumps in, makes it more intriguing. He's a longtime Democrat. He's going to run as an independent.
He's no party affiliation.
No party affiliation, rather. People were leaning on him to not challenge Ehrenberg. And then through all this, when Ehrenberg was going to have a non-competitive race, now he's got an independent and now a Republican. Dina Kiever, an attorney in Palm Beach Gardens, jumped in. So now we have a three-way race, and this thing just stays interesting.
Does it happen often that a party gets involved and says, no, we really want this, if it's true, this candidate, and the rest of you, no, stay out of this? I mean,
well, of course, it goes on all the time, and I think that some of these people that are complaining about it really are complaining that they didn't benefit from having the other candidate shoved aside. It's not unusual for party leaders to try to pick a candidate and get behind that candidate. I think, though, that if it's true that going to a sitting judge and suggesting that she would have competition and that her husband might, you know, face some competition if she got into the race, it may have been a step too far, but you know, it is hardboard politics, and that happens all the time.
If that's true, that's beyond the pale. But Brian's right. This happens both parties all the times, all across the country. But there have long been allegations that the Democratic Party in this area is especially heavy-handed and sometimes ham-fisted with us. So the question will be,
especially in South County.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In another year or two, or after this election, is there going to be some call for reform? Are the clubs going to rise up and you know, start to fight against this? I don't know. This will be a story that we can track for a while.
We're going to move on to some international events that happened and some local events that we want to bring to our viewers' attention. President Obama, of course, made a surprise visit to Afghanistan to announce the combat role of the United States is winding down. The next day, the coffin carrying Private First Class Michael Metcalf was met by family and friends as the 22-year-old soldier from Boynton Beach returned home for the final time. The Pentagon says he is one of more than 1,800 American troops killed in Afghanistan since the fighting began in 2001. Do you think the war is going to be a major issue in the presidential campaign? It's certainly our focal point right now, but does this carry through to the election?
Well, part of what makes it interesting as a political issue is that the Republicans are more hawkish about staying in Afghanistan and maybe even stepping into Pakistan as necessary. So they support the war efforts that Obama has been carrying out. It's Obama's own party, at least elements in his own party, who remember him saying when he was running for election that he was going to get us out of Iraq and out of Afghanistan permanently in a very quick period of time, and that hasn't happened. So it's interesting that he actually, in his actions in Afghanistan, has more support with the GOP than he does within his own party.
But how fundamentally does that age-old argument, are you ready for the 3 a.m. call, impact this race? Everybody says, well, it's about the economy, and it certainly is, and yet people are looking in an insecure world to that commander-in-chief. The White House has made it clear, and their supporters through commercials. You saw President Clinton last week saying President Obama made the tough call. The intimation was, would Mitt Romney have done it? Will that resonate with people?
I think it will.
And Mitt Romney, by the way, very clearly said, I would have made precisely the same call.
And I think he would have, too. And I think John McCain would have, and I think a number of candidates. I think Bill Clinton would have, and I think W would have. So I think they all would have. But Afghanistan, it's in and of itself, is not going to be a major issue or a big issue. But it's a proxy for other issues with the Arab Spring, with Tunisia and Egypt and Libya and Syria, so many other issues, Iraq, Iran. It's a proxy issue for a dangerous world. And Obama can point to the drawdown, the successful drawdown in Iraq, the removal of bin Laden and other al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders. So it gives him that gravitas of a commander-in-chief.
What about the argument from Oklahoma Senator Republican Jim Inhofe, who said, among other things, quote, the president went to Afghanistan to burnish his national security credentials. You can't help in a campaign year that this becomes a politicized discussion about whether it was more strategy or was there the political element. It's hard to separate them. Your take on that criticism?
Real quickly, this is absurd. This notion that the president is taking a victory lap, that he's politicized and been too much celebration at the end of Iraq, and this is ridiculous. George W. Bush landed on the USS Abraham Lincoln, had everybody on the deck dressed a certain way. This country had massive celebrations after World War II, after World War I. It's a country that rightfully celebrates. If anything, I don't think there's been enough discussion or enough celebration of this, including remembering and honoring the nearly 3,000 NATO and U.S. men and women that we've lost in this conflict.
Well, I have to disagree with my good friend here a little bit. I think that when the Obama campaign decided to run a campaign ad about Osama bin Laden and featured Mitt Romney in that ad, I think that was a mistake. I don't think you turn the death of Osama bin Laden into a campaign issue. It can be, but not so boorishly. I think, I watched the president's speech in Afghanistan, and it felt campaign-like to me, and I think that you can get all the benefits of your successes without wrapping it around a campaign commercial and wrapping around other aspects of the campaign. He would have benefited anyway from just handling it in a straightforward presidential manner.
But the foreign policy topic and discussions that it brings up, certainly, I mean, does this help Mitt Romney, hurt Mitt Romney, that he hasn't been a president?
Well, I think they take the issue. I think they've taken the issue away from Mitt Romney. I mean, this is a president who has been remarkably hawkish on a whole with his use of drones and his attacks in Pakistan and all the other things that he's been involved in. Nobody, I think, 4 years ago thought that candidate Obama would be the aggressive military commander, if you will, that he's been during his term as president and as commander-in-chief. And the Republicans really, they can talk about other foreign policy issues, but on this particular range of issues, they really don't have an argument with him.
Unmistakably, Romney suffers, I guess, in comparison. This is an issue, national security, that the Republicans always have the upper hand on. Almost every 4 years, polls show that the public believes the Republicans keep us safe. They do a better job on national security. And while the Democrats may be perceived as doing a better job on the environment, education, senior issues, health care, it's national security. That's why people go to the polls. But with Obama's national security record and George W. Bush's failures in national security, I think that issue's been taken off the table for the Republicans.
We'll be back to wrap it up right here on To The Point after this. Time for the Watson wrap-up and Crowley closer, and Robert, we'll begin with you.
Well, finally, Newt Gingrich is out of the race, and usually when people step down, they think about their legacies and they're magnanimous and gracious. No, not with Newt. Newt barely gave an endorsement of Mitt Romney, saying, is he conservative compared to Obama, compared to Reagan? And then instead of going out with grace, he doesn't thank just Mother, the church. He thanks his super PAC fundraiser, Mr. Adelson.
Brian Crowley?
Well, last week, Congressman Ted Deutsch and Congressman Alan West both appeared before the Forum Club of the Palm Beaches, and later in the day, Alan West was asked if he still believes those folks in the Democratic Party in Congress are communist, and by golly, he still believes they're communist. I'm not sure what Alan sees when he looks in the mirror these days, but apparently communists are everywhere.
Funding for the right wing coming in. That's what he sees.
The campaign heats up.
That's right. Thank you very much for spending time with us on To The Point. Thanks to our guests, as always. And if you'd like to send a comment about today's show, go to WPTV.com, click on the political link. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.